We're combining all the best old school wisdom with all the top new school methods to bring you the optimal way to coach and play the great game of baseball. This is the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass with Coach Bo.
Welcome, everyone. Coaches, parents, players, especially youth coaches out there. This is Coach Bo. I'm fired up to be here. The baseball season starting up, getting going full speed. I am definitely fired up for that. And I feel I can say with pretty good certainty that all of you are excited for the baseball season to get going full speed. So here we are, episode 66 of our weekly podcast, our weekly session, our weekly master class where we get together and we discuss how to be a better baseball coach, how to play better baseball, how to optimize baseball, where we don't get caught up in old school, new school. We just get in a mode of getting better in what works out there on the field, what gets results in the key areas that we need to get better at to be better coaches, better players, play better baseball, and have more fun, and utilize the game of youth baseball, high school baseball, and even above that, that not only get our players better in terms of skills, but get them to be better people, to show them a path to being better people, to create an environment so they're better people long term. So this podcast is very balanced in our approach. We go after skills, drills, technique. We also talk about, I believe, even more importantly, building an environment, creating an environment that makes a good team culture, which makes better players, better people in the long term. And really utilizing the vehicle, in a way you can call it a vehicle, youth sports, baseball, youth baseball, and baseball in general, or sports in general, is a vehicle to building better young people so they have better odds of success, of having the life that they want to have when they're older, by putting in the work now, by learning discipline now, by learning teamwork, by learning how to be coachable, by learning how to hustle. So those things right there, among others, are the things that we're really trying to build on. So skills, drills, technique, of course, strategy. Yes, we're talking about that, but we're also talking about building the person. And I'm really focused on, with this podcast, giving youth coaches a plan of action or an action plan, a way to go out there, some strategies to cover all the bases. No pun intended. Maybe it was intended. I don't know. Just where my mind goes. It's on baseball mode right now. So bear with me as I get fired up for the season to start, just like you guys are. So yes, this podcast is designed for youth baseball all the way up through high school. So basically under high school, because those are the coaches that are not out there really making a living on it, or your parents, you're just volunteering. And high school coaches are essentially volunteering when it comes down to how much money they're making per hour. Not to mention, when you get to the college level, it's, you're making a living out of it as a coach. You're making your living off of it, I should say. And as a pro coach, you're making a living off of it. You make your living from doing that, but you're also at an elite level, a much more elite level. So you're really doing some finite coaching. Also, yes, you're covering some of the bigger areas and some of the bigger needs. Of course, you're always going to do that through life. We all need that support through life when it comes from coaches, whether we're in college or professional baseball. But the youth game, I believe, high school gets a little more coverage, but I think the youth baseball is really underserved, and that's why I'm here. So with that said, we're going to get into it. Part one, here's a tip I got for pregame. It's a pregame tip. This has to do with your throwing routine, your throwing program. So before every game and even before practice, but this is specifically a tip for before a game. Before a game, I highly recommend that your players, your throwing routine, not go to a max distance for very long, if at all, before the games. Of course, I am a big fan of long toss. I've gone back and forth with this over the years. I've been coaching now 17 plus years. I started off by doing long toss. I got away from a little bit because I started seeing angles of throwing angles, and we're going to talk about that here. The throwing angles start to get a little bit off, but I've come back around to, over the last 7 or 8 years, really buying into the long toss insofar as that has a follow-up to the maxed distance throwing. And we're going to talk about that right now. Before the games, I don't recommend spending a lot of time at max distance throwing. One, if you're trying to build arm strength before a game, that would be the equivalent of a football player doing a full workout, say a bunch of squats right before a game. You're not going to see that. They may do some squats. Players do work out before games as a warm-up, but they're not doing rep, set. They're not doing a whole routine before their actual athletic competition. They're going to do that after the game, the days after, and even in the offseason, those weeks during the offseason. So throwing program, throwing routine before a game. Be very cognizant. Be careful to have your players going to a max distance for a long time, if at all. Players should stretch it out before the game. They should stretch it out, their arm. They should stretch the distance out to warm up, to make those throws, because there are throws in the game that are going to be not necessarily a max distance, but some may be, very few, but typically there are some long throws in the game. I think we'd all agree on that. There are longer throws in the game, some that really stretch out the player's arms. So we definitely want to be warmed up for every throw or distance, essentially the game intensity. Whatever the max game intensity is going to be, we want to have the body prepared to do that. We don't want to wait for the game to get it prepared for the max intensity, whether that's a full swing, a full sprint, a full throw, etc. I do recommend, if you can, try to go to a max distance before the game, but I would get there a little more efficiently insofar as that you make sure your players' arms are warmed up correctly and properly and that they're not rushing it and still a little cold, especially with the weather right now. Still in a lot of areas, it's cold. Be careful pushing it out too fast. But once you get to the max distance, I would without a doubt shut it down right then. Their last throw, max distance, they can't get it to their partner, done. Start bringing it back in. Now here's another tip. So that's tip 1. Cut your max distance throwing down before the game to 1 rep. So you get to that max distance, the player shows that he can't get it to his partner. That's it. You're not building arm strength and durability and endurance right before the game. That to me is foolish. During practice, I love that idea of throwing high reps at a long distance, building up stamina, building up endurance, and really challenging the body to work efficiently together so it can maximize that throw. A lot of people think long distance throwing is really about the arm. It really starts with the legs and the momentum of the body and the efficiency of the whole kinetic chain, which is just kind of ends with the arm, but has so much going on with rotation. A lot of it's just momentum, efficiency, using the legs and things like that. I'm a big fan of long toss, max distance throwing during practice. And I'm a big fan of utilizing a higher reps or higher volume during practice. So this is my rule of thumb for you guys. Max distance throwing, cut it off 1 rep. That's it. When they get to the distance they can't make it, they start to bring it back in. Here's tip number 2. Before the game, it's very important that when they bring it back in, and this is something I see get messed up a lot, and I think can be very beneficial to making or helping players make better throws and less throws that are airmailed, that are sailing over heads. It's not going to fix everything. There's no fix for everything. There's a magic pill for every error during the game. What we need to do is reprogram our players. We need to reprogram their throwing angle that's going to be used more often in the game. Max distance throwing in the game. The only time this, first off, infielders are never going to max distance throw for the most part. If they're max distance throwing in a game that's an infielder, it might be like a 7 or 8 U. They're probably not getting that runner at first. If a shortstop goes in the hole and has to max distance throw with some arc to it, they're probably not going to get the runner. So you better off just teaching them an arm fake or just holding the ball. But an outfielder might make a max distance throw, right? And a max distance throw typically has some arc to it. Well, it almost always has arc, right? Just the physics. So it's going to have some arc, which means you have to create an angle with your throw. Your release point has to be angled upward. It has to be angled upward relative to the ground. And in the game, most throws, most effective throws, most game used throws or game-like throws are not thrown with an upward arc. Almost none are. In fact, when you get to the professional game, the Cespedes throws that you see on YouTube, those are 1 out of like 10,000, where he throws it with a high arc from the foul pole and gets the guy at home plate. Most of the throws, 99% of game throws, are thrown with an angle that's parallel to the ground, a release point parallel to the ground. And so the ball will, or slightly upward, depending on the age. If it's a youth player, they might slightly throw it and need to get across the infield. They might have a slight upward angle. But you see where I'm going with this. Max distance throwing has the max arc angle, meaning when you release the ball, when the player releases the ball, it's going upward. They're not throwing pop-ups, but they're definitely putting some arc to it. And in the game, they're not going to do that. So when we bring it back in, when we have the players bring it back in, we need to reprogram their throwing angle, their release point angle relative to the ground to be more game-like. They need to make throws more straight to the target, more in line with the target. And so you bring it back in, and here's the key. You want to bring them back in using an efficient amount of volume, but enough to where they reprogram it so when they come to the game, that higher arm angle, that higher trajectory is not just still there in their mindset, in their arm. They're going to train. If they train a certain way, their body's going to remember that, and it's going to take it over to the game for the most part. Or in some ways, it's going to take it over to the game. Not every throw, and some players have kinesthetic awareness to adjust it quickly. But again, you want to play the percentages here. And as a coach, you want to have your players come back in. For example, let's say they go out to 150 feet. Say you're coaching like a 10U team or a 12U, and you're at 150 feet max distance, somewhere in there, just ballpark. That's just kind of a round number, 150. And you're bringing them back in. You may have them come in like 10 feet or 5 big steps, and then have them throw 2 throws, and then 10 feet, have them throw 2 throws. And really what you're trying to tell them to do is by the time they get back to 90 feet, 60 feet, 80 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet, they're throwing the ball on a line. There should be, and you can even also take it to the next level, and this would be something I would highly recommend, is when you bring it back in, regardless of your players, if they're pitchers or not, even if they're not pitchers, you you may have their partner get down low into a catcher stance and have them throw some pitches. And you can see this kind of over exaggerates getting on top of the ball, though you don't really ever get on top of the ball, but that feeling of working down a downward throw. Most throws that are bad throws, especially in youth baseball, are thrown a little higher or to the sides. So the sides what we're talking about here is not helping throwing left or right, but this is helping where we're not throwing it over our target, over our partner, over our teammate. So we're trying to reprogram the throwing angle, the release angle before the game starts. When we get out into the game, we're not air mailing or sailing throws. It's a little thing that can pay off. Remember, you're going to lose and win a lot of games by 1 run or 2 runs. And so if you can do something like this, where, hey, I cap the max distance throwing before a game at 1 throw, and then I bring it in efficiently, but also give the players enough time to reprogram that throwing slot so they're making nice firm throws. So when the game comes around, they've reprogrammed it enough. They've kind of overwritten those old files, and now they've put these new files on top of it that show or kind of tell the player, this is how, and this is the angle in which we're going to throw the ball come game time. It happens really fast. It's a little thing, but I think it can add up. So I think this is a tip that what I see is two errors. I see 2 big errors with all of baseball and definitely youth baseball, but I see this at every level. 2 errors, in my opinion, are the team does a lot of max distance throwing before a game, and that's error number 1. Cap it at 1. There's no reason to build durability and strength right before an athletic competition that's going to be high intensity. And that second error that I see so frequently that can be avoided just with some thought, some planning, and some instruction is to have your players come back in. I would build it into the routine so you don't have to just keep micromanaging them. They know the routine. They come back in and you can say 2 throws, 10 steps, 10 by 2, 10 2, 10 2, or something like that you feel is a good fit. Again, fit it to your needs, your players' needs, their durability, how warm or cold the weather is, how strong they are, how much they've thrown that week, or how much they're going to throw in the upcoming games and tournaments. But I would have them come back in from that max distance throwing, bringing it closer to reprogram it. Now you could say, well, why don't just bring them all the way back in and let them have 15 throws up close? You could do that. You could just go max distance throwing and then bring them right back in and have them finish with, let's say you're working with high school, like varsity high school players. You want them to come back in and maybe you have them really fire off a bunch of 90-foot throws, 100-foot throws, 80-foot throws, those distances that are common at that level. Or for 12U, you might have them fire off a bunch of 70 or 60-foot throws. Maybe you bring them straight in from the max distance throw and have them jog right in and set them up at the distance that is a typical game distance, or kind of the average distance where they can really throw it firm. 12U's this maybe like 70-foot, 14U's maybe like 80, 90-foot, and varsity players 100-foot, 7U, 6U players, 8-year-old players, that may be like 60-foot throws, but a distance where you bring them in and they can fire the ball on a straight line. And then also I think having their partner get down into a catcher's position will even take it another level up where they're really having to force to really make the throw and finish and follow through, and necessarily on top of the ball, because if you ever watch a ball get released, the hand actually slides off kind of underneath it, behind and underneath. It doesn't actually stay on top, of course, when it comes to throwing like a fastball, a forcing grip, or your typical throw an infielder or outfielder would make. So I definitely think those 2 tips right there, those 2 things to keep in mind right there when it comes to a pregame throwing routine, the pregame throwing program. Again, we've talked about having a system and having this all scripted out. This should all be scripted out. You should implement a throwing routine the first day of practice. If you need to start throwing the first day of practice. If you can get away with it, you don't start throwing the first day of practice. You start working on strength, conditioning, things like that, mobility, and also hitting, things that don't require necessarily the arm to be used right away. That would be if you had, say, a high school team and you were working some fall stuff. I know a good friend of mine, Coach Bombeck at Rancho Bernardo High. He's an amazing coach. And I know when we talked a while back, he shared with me that he has a progression through his early off-season training, and it doesn't involve throwing right away, and he builds into it. Now, at this point in the season, I know for a lot of coaches, you're getting ready for the season. So that's neither here nor there, but something to keep in the back of the mind for next year. And we'll talk about that. And we've talked about it at length, strength and conditioning, doing things like that before you actually get into throwing. But however, most of you are ready for the season. You've started the season. You've started practicing. So you need to get these 2 tips going when it comes to game time. Implement these 2 things in your pregame throwing routine. On the same topic, throwing. Here are 2 of my favorite throwing drills, throwing competitions. These are throwing competitions. I love using these during practice, right after the throwing routine. So you do your dynamic warm-up, you do your throwing routine, and then you go right into these throwing competitions. They are not sophisticated, but it's the little details that make a drill great. That's the key you got to understand as a coach. The little details, the little things is what makes the drill great. Insofar insofar as you are utilizing the 80-20 rule and training, using a drill that's training the things that are the big needle movers? Are you spending a lot of your time on the 20% of things that are going to get 80% of your results? And then within those 20%, those big 20% of needle movers, make sure that you pay attention to the little things to make it a great drill, a great training environment. All right, so you have your players finish their throwing routine, throwing program. You have them jog over. You can divide them up over the 4 bases. You divide them up. Say you have 12 players. You put 3 at each base, first, second, third, home. Then what you do, you quickly have them number themselves off 1, 2, 3, and then you tell them number 1s are up. Number 1s come up. Number 2 and 3 are going to be back behind. So those groups are going to weigh with their eyes on the baseballs. And then you're going to have the ball start at home plate. Have your catcher in a stance, ball in the glove, pops up, fires the ball to first base, and you go around the horn with it. You can do little details on this. You can have little nuances. You can have the first baseman, second baseman, third baseman, even the catcher, put a tag down in front of the base. You can just have them make sure that they have their foot on the base. You can have them reverse pivot. You can have them like spin and throw or catch and do an inside pivot. I think that should be mixed up each round or every other round. Now, I'm a big fan of getting reps in. So you have your 3 groups, but I've done this drill many of times and it takes less than 10 seconds. Most good 90-foot base path throws are going to be in that 6-second range, 7-second range to get it all the way around. So your next group is ready to jump in there as soon as that ball gets back to the catcher. The next group hops in. They have their own ball. Each group has their own ball. In fact, I would have each player with a ball in their pocket. If the ball gets away and gets thrown away, they grab the ball out of their back pocket and they continue the drill from where that ball went away. So if the first baseman throws it away to the second baseman simply takes the ball out of his pocket and finishes his throw. Or you could even have the first baseman take the ball out of his pocket and actually make a good throw. So you could actually go back and say, hey, you first baseman, you airmailed it to second base, take the ball out of your pocket, make the throw, and they're on the clock. There's 2 ways to have consequences and motivation on this. You can count the total amount of bad throws, and then the team, that group, or the entire team, I prefer you pick maybe that group of 4 players, bear crawls 30 feet for every bad throw, or 25 feet for every bad throw. I like the 30 feet. It's easy to use with 60, 90 bases, a third of a base or half of a base. It's easy to break it up. And typically there's going to be more than one bad throw while you're doing this 10 or 15 minute throwing drill. I like it because you're throwing the ball around the bases, so they have to work on making a throw to a base, so it's got to be accurate. But more importantly, the guy catching it has to keep his foot on the base, or he has to make a tag depending on how you set it up. You simply have your clipboard or a phone or somebody tallying the bad throws, and at the end, they do 30 feet of bear crawls for each bad throw. Don't stop the drill while it's going on for a bad throw. You want to get reps, but you want to have the consequences also in there. And we discussed this about the throwing program, the throwing routine. Do not have players stop and go play fetch. They'll get the ball, surely, but do it all together at the end where they all can just sprint and get the baseballs, time them on that, and then have them do bear crawls at the end as a group efficiently. Boom, drill's done. All right, on the line, down the foul line, and boom, they go. They have 6 bad throws. You tell them 90 feet and back. All right, or if it's a 60-foot base path, they're going 60 foot back and then 60 feet again, and that's their punishment. Trust me, it's going to get better over time. It may look ugly some days, but that extra motivation of having to do a bear crawl, I've seen the results with a lot of different players and a lot of different teams. It works. It's an effective, quick, efficient consequence, extrinsic consequence, of course, that really keeps players focused. Be one of those coaches that's all about intrinsic, keep your fingers crossed, and the players got to do it because they want to do it. Or you can live in the real world and have extrinsic motivators too, things like a bear crawl and playing time, reduction, etc. Here's another thing you can do. You can also time the throws around. So you can time each group. Remember, you're switching groups quick. You're switching groups. So if the first group goes and it takes 6 seconds or 7 seconds to get around, the next group should start within about 3 seconds. So you're getting one group every 10 seconds. That's 6 groups in a minute, and in 10 minutes, 60 groups. So each player is going to get 20 throws in 10 minutes. 20 throws in 10 minutes, that's pretty efficient. Even better would be to have multiple diamonds going. If you have multiple fields or multiple bases out there, then that's even better. So long as you're not having players where they're going to get hit by an errant throw, you want to always make sure that the players are set up, the drill set up safely. So you're going around the horn, you say tag, the tag's got to be to the ground, it's got to touch the ground, it's got to be in front of the base, you stipulate that so there's no cheating. They got to have their foot on the base. If they get pulled off, they got to come back and touch the base. So you can see where I'm going with my mindset on keeping the integrity of the drill. And then you have each team, you time each team, and then maybe you keep track of the winner. So, all right, round 1, you have them go around real quick. quick. Team A, the number ones, they did it in 6 seconds. The next group did it in 6.5, and the last group took 10 seconds because they threw one away. So they're pretty much automatically eliminated from winning that round. So, all right, team one, the number ones, they won round one. Boom, you just keep track. You say, we're going to do 20 rounds, and you just tally. You have team one on a column, team two on a column, team three, and you just tally the winners. And at the end, the two teams that don't win go and bear crawl. And you can tell them we're going to bear crawl 60 feet and back, or you could have them do 90 feet and back, or center field fence and back, or you could have them go to the center field fence and jog back. You'll feel it out. Remember, you want to push your players, but you also want to be fair at the same time and not just waste a bunch of practice time. But trust me, if you don't have extrinsic motivators, things like that, whether it's playing time reduction or the bear crawl is my favorite, physical punishment consequence. If you don't have those built in, I think you're going to lose a lot of quality and a lot of focus, more the focus and the intent. If you expect players to go out there and just be 100% ready to go without some kind of kick in the butt from time to time, and some players a lot of the time, then you probably haven't coached at all. This is your first time coaching. Now, the second part to that drill. So you have the round the horn. I like the round the horn. The other one is across the diamond. I have the players pair off into groups across a diamond. So you have the second base group throwing with home plate. So your catchers, that would be ideal. And you would typically have your third baseman or players that typically play third base over at third base, and your first baseman over by first base, and they're throwing across a diamond. So now you're having a competition. Here's how the competition rolls for this one. Again, you can have a tag. The glove's got to hit the dirt in front of the base or it doesn't count. You can do it where they have to keep the foot on the base. I would do one of the two. I wouldn't just have them throwing back and forth, because what you're going to have is players come way up front. They're going to come off the bag. They're going to run up 10 feet, catch it, and make the throw. It also doesn't penalize bad throws. I recommend having the receiver near the base where they have to touch the base or put a tag down in front of the base, thus requiring a much better throw from their partner. And there's a penalty if they don't, because they got to go catch it and come back, touch the base, catch it, come back, put the tag down. So you're going across the diamond with this set. So this would be, you go around the horn and then you go across the diamond. You are essentially hitting the only angles that can be made on the diamond. You have your 90-foot base. So you're making a 90-foot turn with your throw. You're going around the horn. You're going from base to base in order or backwards. I recommend, so back to the first drill where you're going around the horn, the ball could start with the catcher's ball in their glove. Always start with the ball in the glove, because that's what's going to happen in the game. They're going to catch the ball. They're not going to catch it with their hand. They're going to catch it with their glove. So make sure they work the transfer. They should not have the ball in their hand in the glove. The ball should be in the glove. Hand should be near the glove, or wherever it's going to be when they catch a ball, catch a pitch. What I would do is I would go from home plate, catcher to first base, then to second, then to third, then to home, and then I would rotate it the next round. I would go the other way. I would go catcher to third. Well, it might be your shortstop, but third or second, they're throwing at the second base, and then the first base. You're going reverse order around the horn. That's how I would do that first drill. And the second one, which is all kind of together, and you could do, say, 10 rounds of that, and then 10 rounds where they're throwing across the diamond. So catchers are throwing to second base is throwing back to catcher, first base, bag, or usually it's first baseman. You might need to slide over like one second baseman over there. They're throwing over. You're not always going to have, make sure your groups are even. You don't need to have all your shortstops at second. You can slide one of them over if you have a couple shortstops. You can slide them over to third. Okay. At the end of the day, they're throwing the ball to a base, to a player. They're not taking ground balls, and they're not learning like where to go on a certain play. This is just a throwing drill. So you can have guys mixed around. I would have your catchers behind home plate, but even that is not a huge deal. So you're going across the diamond, and you would just simply say something like, all right, first team to 10. So they're going to throw across the diamond as fast as they can, gets to 10. Now, you may have, what you're going to have is, say, 3 guys at each base. So they're going to rotate through, or you could say, even better would be to say first group to 12, because now you get 4 throws. You would get an even amount of throws per player. As you can see, there's a little nuances to make each drill fun. And this is something that keeps your mind working as a coach. This is what makes it not get boring out there. You're always looking to praise. You're always looking to support your players, to be a positive influence, but you're also looking for all those things to make your drill more efficient, more authentic, more game-like, a little more challenging, insofar as it's fair for everybody. So it's kind of like it's a fun game. It's like a puzzle where you're trying to make the drill a little bit more authentic, more fun, without overcomplicating it. You really want to make sure you hammer the 20%, the big needle movers, the 20, not the 80. So you would have them throw and challenge them. You could do it with a stopwatch. I'm a big fan of using a stopwatch, but I think the across the diamond is simply something where they're not throwing it at each other. They're not throwing it around the horn, so you don't need anybody else to slide in. It's 2 teams versus each other. They're playing each other. They're going against each other. So you could do this, and boom, it doesn't even have to, once they're done, you just chalk it up and say, all right, the first group, the first team that gets to 7 wins, then the other team then goes and does a bear crawl to center field and jogs back. Or you could even utilize something like, they are the team that loses that drill then is the team that is going to clean the dugouts after practice or do the field work after practice. Things like that are always nice. So the team that wins does a little. I like the bear crawl because I like them all to pitch in and have some kind of teamwork when it comes to maintaining the field and cleaning up after themselves. I love the bear crawl because the players don't like it at all. It doesn't hurt them. It's very safe. It's very efficient. And it doesn't remind them of things that they're going to do. Remember, back when I talked about the bear crawl, there's a specific reason I talked about this. And I even shared what my professor in college 20 years ago told us. Don't use physical punishment when it comes to athletes and sports and PE, etc. I think that for the most part, he's right because you don't want to punish with the goal. The goal is to have players be in shape. The goal is to have, athletes be in good condition. So now you're punishing them with conditioning. You're punishing them with the thing you want them to do. But I love bear crawls because it's a different modality. And I don't think players mistake bear crawls for their typical sprint conditioning, their workouts in the weight room, etc. It's just different and it feels like punishment and it's tough and it's quick. They're not going to get hurt. It's safe. Do it on the grass. Don't do it in the parking lot. So those two throwing drills, I love the slide in right after the throwing routine. Go around the horn. The little nuances, I think, is what makes those successful. You're going around the horn and then you're going across the diamond. So you're going longer throws and you're going shorter. You're going reverse. So you would reverse if you're going around the horn. You would go like home plate to first, to second, to third, to home, and then back the other way because that's going to happen in the game. They're going to throw it both ways. I would require players to touch the base when they catch it or put the tag down in front. That's authentic to the game and it enforces better throws. I would have the punishment be, or the consequence of not winning, or the losing team do bear crawls at the end of the drill. Don't do it mid-drill. Don't slow down the practice, the drill. Do it all efficiently, all at the end. Efficiency, batch it. We've talked about batching here. Batch stuff. You always want to batch it. There's a reason that we put our trash in a trash can inside the house, and then, most people put it in trash cans, even in an office or in the bedroom or the bathroom. There's a small trash can, and then when that gets full, you go out and put it in the trash can in the garage or outside. That's batching. We batch all day. We batch our errands. We batch all sorts of stuff. So why not do it when it comes to baseball practice? Don't go back and forth between the drill and bear crawl, this, that, and the other. Do the drill. And then it's the same reason with the throwing routine. I'm so big on doing the bear crawls at the end. One, it enforces good throws. It enforces the players to stay focused during the throwing routine. But it doesn't, they're not fetching during the throwing routine. They're keeping the volume of quality reps up. Then at the end, it batches the consequence. It batches that consequence, that punishment for not making good throws. It batches it all together at the end. It keeps them separate, and then you don't have all that transition time wasted. Now, there's another throwing drill that I really like. Again, there's 1,000 ways you can set up a throwing drill, but to me, you want to make sure that you have some key drills that you can get into. One of the biggest reasons to have fewer drills is the setup goes much faster. You need to have multiple drills. You don't want to get monotonous. You don't want players to get bored doing the same drill every practice. But I believe if you have a throwing drill, you have 3 throwing drills or 4. I think 3 throwing drills is good because you have your throwing routine, and also you have throws built into other drills like ground ball drills and things like that. Having fewer drills allows for a faster setup and more quality within that drill because there's less thinking about how the drill is run and more about executing the move, the skill, the technique, etc. So those 2 drills along with an outfield relay drill, those 3 as far as throwing drills are plenty when it comes to throwing specific, throwing only drills that are really just based on more accurate throws. They don't involve catching fly balls, fielding ground balls, and making throws, pitchers, bullpens, etc. Now, I know this last part I want to hit on real quick is I know the Super Bowl's over and it's baseball season now, but I'll tell you what, I did a Bruce Arians segment on the podcast before the Super Bowl. That was recorded before the Super Bowl, and Bruce Arians, a Tampa Bay coach, tell you what, he gets it. He gets it. He just understands. I mean, that was such a well-coached game. Yeah, Tom Brady and Gronk and those guys played great, and that middle linebacker, I'm drawing a blank on his name, number 45, had a heck of a game, and I believe number 58, kind of a hybrid defensive end linebacker, he had a heck of a game. There were some great individual performances, but at the end of the day, that team was very well coached. Those coordinators were dialed in. I mean, that defensive game plan was unreal. That game plan defensively, if you saw how far back they played their safeties, I don't think I've seen that any recent. I mean, they played their cornerbacks. They had a game plan where they went man underneath with Kelsey. They went man with their linebackers. They dropped guys way back off the ball before the snap. And they said, hey, you're going to beat us like this or you're not going to beat us. And man, my point is Bruce Arians gets it. He hires good coordinators. He puts in a system. He knows how to work players. He's good with players. Tell you what, that's somebody I would go and study. There's a good book about Bruce Arians out there. Go check it out. Go read that book. Bruce Arians. I think he was the oldest guy to win a Super Bowl. How cool is that? That's awesome. Dude's like 70 and he's still getting it done. And he's had a lot of success in the NFL, coaching over with the Cardinals. And he's also was a coach, I believe, the offensive coordinator or a quarterback's coach with the Colts, with Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, I believe, Ben Roethlisberger with the Steelers. So he's had a lot of success. I know his college record isn't all that great, but that was so long ago. The guy's old and he's definitely gotten a lot better over the years. And man, Bruce Arians, I was fired up to see that. I had to bring that up. This podcast, as you know, is designed to be a 30-minute podcast, efficient podcast, a weekly podcast where I'm sharing out information efficiently. That's the whole purpose of this. It's not an audiobook because I do ad lib and try to make it a little more conversational and feel than a straight audiobook. I do script it out because I want to be efficient with it. And I want to make sure that you guys get a lot of good information quickly. But I also, myself, I love audiobooks first and foremost, but I also from time to time like listening to interviews. And I like the interviews that are the long form, like Joe Rogan's podcast. But Joe Rogan does one and I can't keep up and I don't want to listen to most of them. I love the format, but he has some guys on there, some gals on there that are just phenomenal. And one of them is at the top of my list is Elon Musk. He's the top of my list. One of the big things that I think I've tried to bring to the table is a mindset that's not just baseball coaching related. A lot of the stuff I share with you is stuff I learned in the trenches as a teacher, inner city teacher, because you learn right away whether you're going to get that team, that group of players as a PE teacher, 55 students, day in and day out, 55 students coming from some really harsh environments, trying to get them on the same page, going together, safe, trying to get them to do the drill, trying to get them to do the workout. A lot of that, motivating and working through so many different types of players and really students and finding out what works and what doesn't work real quick. And if it doesn't, it's real ugly. And I learned, so I try to bring that, but I also try to draw from all the smart minds out there in the world, like the 80-20 baseball masterclass. The 80-20 has nothing to do with baseball. It's not the 20-80, which is the very well-known scouting system, the 20-80 scouting grading scale. This is the 80-20 baseball podcast. It just happens to have the same numbers involved. The 80-20 comes from outside. It's actually an old Italian economist from like late 1800s, early 1900s, Vilfredo Pareto. Those are the kind of things like the 80-20 principle. Those are the things I'm trying to gather. So like Elon Musk, I listened to how Elon Musk thinks, and he doesn't really transfer a lot of his knowledge doesn't transfer directly, and I haven't been able to kind of put it into a way to kind of share it in terms of baseball, but I'll tell you what, his mindset is awesome. So I think his mindset is really good. I think he's a guy that we can just all learn from. I'm sure he's not perfect in every way, but you know what? I love listening to a guy like that because he's just very interesting. The way he looks at things, he questions things, but he's also founded in principles and things, and he's kind of founded in certain things. So anyways, I love that. I listened to Joe Rogan's Elon Musk, and that's when I like that long form interview because it dives into some cool stuff and there's definitely some jokes. And I did tell you, I am going to do interviews for this podcast coming up. The goal is to slate them for the summer, late summer, going into the preseason fall of next year. So that is on the docket and I'm excited about that. But really the idea of this is to get you a lot of stuff in 30 minutes ish each week, a lot of stuff that you can take out there, at least 1, 2, or 3 things you can take out there and go out there and make the baseball community a better place, your team better, your players' skills better, the environment better, you feel more comfortable. I really want to just give you an action plan and really stuff that's founded in results, founded in evidence, things that work. I want to give you an action plan of these things to go out there and have success, because when you go out there with the mindset, when you learn all this stuff, when you go out there knowing what you're learning here and you go out there, you're going to feel so much more confident. I get great feedback, emails, and even on Twitter, I get some great feedback, and that's awesome. You can, speaking of Twitter, follow me 8020_baseball. I'm not a fan of this whole Twitter blocking, or I don't like this censorship thing, but hey, at the end of the day, I only use it for baseball and it seems to be a good resource for baseball. And so I'm going to stick with it for that. I just utilize it for baseball. And from what I understand, Twitter hasn't started banning baseball coaches because I believe in a little launch angle and bear crawls. But nonetheless, you can follow me at 8020_baseball. Those are the numbers, 8020_baseball. You can follow me. I put out a couple things every week. I'll retweet some of the stuff that I find out there that I think is really good, and I'll add a little thought to it. So definitely kind of keep that paradigm evolving as our coaching paradigm evolving. So I throw out little tips each week, a few times each week. week, at least twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week. I try not to bombard my followers with just a bunch of stuff every day or all the time just to hear myself or to read my own tweets. As you all know, I do think it's more important than probably anything is to value our time. And I certainly value yours. With that said, you can support the podcast really quickly, just quick, like within 1 minute, you can support the podcast using a link that's in the show summary right there on your app, right there below the episode. And I want to thank those of you that are already supporting the podcast. Thank you so much. Have yourself a wonderful week, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your health. Take care of your health. Get that sleep. Keep taking care of your families and go out there with this information, this knowledge, and make the baseball community a better place. Make your team, your players better. Make the environment better. Make it a win-win-win for everybody. Until next Tuesday, thank you all for being here, and I'll catch you on the flip side.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.